folks, and welcome to this week's show. My special guest today is Paul.
Hi.
And we're going to be focusing on the albums of the great British rock band Free. So this should be a little bit different, a little bit interesting with a great sort of classic blues rock band. Paul, how did you first discover Free?
Well, I mean, I think I was probably 15 when I was just really getting into 1971. I was just getting into music. It was kind of like a kid in a sweet shop in those days, because all these great bands, you know, you were just diving in and discovering all these amazing new bands, you know, having sort of been brought up watching Top of the Pops, and that was your diet of music, and all, suddenly realizing there's this whole new world of different music, you know, and you know, Free were one of the bands, along with obviously the likes of Who and Deep Purple, Rory Gallagher and people like that, but they were just a huge band in my teenage years, and you know, just really got into them at an early stage, and I've loved them ever since. It's over 50 years really I've been listening to Free's music, and I still love them to this day. You know, I don't get tired of listening to the music at all. I was listening to some of it this morning, and I'm just like, it's still incredible, you know, really incredible music.
Yeah, a great band in my opinion, one of the really great bands, and one of the most underrated bands because they never made it in America. Whereas Bad Company, great band, are massive, but in my opinion, Free are a better band, even though half of Bad Company are Free.
Well, see, to me, Bad Company are just Free light, you know. I mean, to me, I like some of Bad Company stuff, like you say, but I would listen to Free over Bad Company and I love Paul Rodgers' voice, and he's written some good songs after Free, but no, they don't rate for me in comparison to Free, I'm afraid, you know.
He's one of the great rock singers as well, isn't he? Often known as the voice of rock, and his voice is one of the rare few. I mean, bearing in mind he's about 70 odd. One of the rare few whose voice still is outstanding. Whereas normally your voice is either got deeper, it's dropped off, or it's got very thin and reedy in some vocals.
So many singers like that now. You know?
But his voice is still impeccable. I saw him in Newcastle City Hall about 3 years ago, and he did like basically the Free songbook. And it was an outstanding gig, and he was saying how much he loved going to City Hall, and he saw Hendrix there and that, and it was just an amazing show, and the band was sensational. Still got it, absolutely top-notch singer. So we're going to be ranking the 7 albums by them. We're including the Free album because we feel that it's an essential album, and I'm going to start the show for once. So my number 7 is the album Free, which is their second album. It was recorded just 3 months after the debut. It came out October 69, but it was actually recorded in sort of January 69. I personally think it's a bit rushed. That's just my viewpoint. You know, at this point, this is the crazy thing. I mean, Andy Fraser, the bass player, who in my opinion is one of the great bass players and never gets mentioned.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Top-notch player. Was 16, absolutely incredible. 16. Yeah, I can't get my head around the fact that he was 16. Paul Rodgers was 19 and had that voice.
I think Andy Fraser was actually 15 when he joined Free as well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they joined after being, I think he was, and I could be wrong a little bit, it was Alexis Corner who gave them the name Free, and I think Andy Fraser was playing with them for a little while. And John Mayall was involved as well at some point down the route, and certainly with Kossoff. It's just crazy at that age. At that age, it's just absolutely nuts. I mean, for me, it's a good album. I've given it 3 stars. There's some great songs in it. Songs of Yesterday, Woman, magnificent. I'll Be Creepin's great. 3 Dog Night covered it. I just think it's good, but it's not essential. The album cover, and you'll see it on the screen, was actually mimicked by the singer Lordi on a solo album where I think she's got no clothes on, you know, and she's clearly mimicked the album sleeve, which is good. But as I say, for me, it's a good album after the debut, which will come further down, which is the album that really got me into Free as a sort of 14, 15-year-old lad. It's disappointing, but it's still a good album. So 3 stars for me. Paul, what have you got in at number 7?
I would start by saying that, I mean, love all the Free albums, and it is a bit like choosing your favourite children when it comes to choosing albums by a band like Free. I'm going to go along with a lot of what you said, but for me, Tons of Sobs is the album that I've got in number 7. I like it. I like it a lot, but I think it's a very raw album, and I also think it's a very dark album as well. I mean, I'm just looking at it on the computer screen here. Even the cover is really dark. You know, it's like, it looks like a picture of a graveyard with a rabbit in it and a gravestone or something. It's almost like a Black Sabbath cover.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a bizarre cover, isn't it?
Just suddenly came to me there just now. It's like, you know, I wouldn't have looked at a place on a Black Sabbath album that. And the music's quite dark and quite heavy in a lot of ways as well. And that's not to say it's not good. It's just it's a long way removed from what Free became. You know, if you compare Tons of Sobs with like Highway, you know, and let's go in one. I know that's going one extreme to the other. And I think the best of Free was kind of somewhere in the middle there. But you know, but if they found their groove and that, it was a different thing altogether. But I mean, there's some great stuff on it. I mean, Walk in My Shadow is really good. I think there's some really cringe-worthy lyrics on that. I mean, which is probably indicative of the time that it came out. You know, Wild Indian Woman. You know, there's a lyric about you don't need your horses when you've got me to ride or something like that. I mean, you just would not get away with that nowadays.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, an indication of what is to come from Free, that the raw ingredients that were there were going to get moulded into something much, much better. I mean, if you want to hear Kossoff really sort of going for it, you know, going down slow, is probably the most aggressive guitar playing you'll hear from him on a studio album. I mean, it's 8.5 minutes. It's basically just a Kossoff solo. But that in later albums that became distilled into something much greater, in my opinion. You know, it was like he knew what he had a talent, but for me, the 3 words that sum up Kossoff are less is more. You know, and the old maxim, you know, leave your audience wanting more. I mean, that was the case time and time again with Kossoff's guitar playing. You know, but I mean, it's a great album. Got some great, it's great standards from the live set. I'm a Mover. The Hunter, but you know, the Hunter's just like one of those. I think as we said before, every band in those days would play the Hunter. You just didn't get away with not playing it, you know.
It was the law, wasn't it? It was there.
Oh yeah.
The phrase I used is when we played it when I was like 15, 16 and doing. I'm still gigging, but when in the 80s in particular, when I was playing, and you had to do the Hunter. I remember my old drummer, Kev, bless him, used to say. Even ABBA could play the City Hall and somebody would shout out for the Hunter. The Hunter! So,
but yeah, I mean, I think it's a great, as I say, for me, it was just an indication of a kind of taster of what was to come from Free, you know, and I like it, but I would probably give it 3 stars.
Okay, so 3 stars. If you have a look on the categories, folks, you will see our star ranking. And so, for example, I'll just talk you through those ratings. So, as you can see on the screen, 5 is a masterpiece, 4.5 is essential, 4 is excellent, 3.5 very good, 3, which we've given so far there, are good albums, certainly worth listening to, good albums. 2.5 is fair, 2 is weak, 1.5 is very poor, 1 is awful, just abysmal. All right, and 0.5, which we've not reached yet, but I'm sure I will, is don't bother. So those are the rankings, and as we say there, we're at 3 stars already. Well, my number 6 is the 1972 album Free at Last. It got a number 9 in the charts. So it was quite a big hit. It's the last album to feature Andy Fraser. He'd go on to form the band Sharks with Chris Spedding, which is quite a good album, actually. Go and check them out. The band only reformed really to help Kossoff, who was going through a drugs habit, as we know what the consequences were in the end, unfortunately. There's some really good songs on the album. I personally think it's a little patchy, but there are some terrific songs on it. I mean, Catch a Train, I think it's a very good song. It's very Bad Company. I think this is the most Bad Company of all their albums. I think this is quite an American sounding album. I don't know whether they're deliberately trying to cater towards that market, but there are some great songs on it. I love Sail On. Excellent. And then it gets that groove. Oh, it really moves. Traveling Man, superb guitar tone on it. I love the phaser sound that he gets. Just magnificent. Little Bit of Love. soul, again, that soul groove. Again, I've got written here, very bad company bassing. But there are some songs that I don't get. Guardian of the Universe just sounds like a demo, and terrible title. Child is a lovely acoustic sort of intro, ambiguous lyrics, but a great feel. Goodbye is just classic free. Really great song, really great song. And then I've written here, should have been on the album, is the song Molten Gold, which was recorded at the time as well. And it's on as one of the bonus tracks on some of them. So I'm sure like iTunes and all that will have it on. So give that a go. It's a very good album. It is a very good album. It does sound, as I say, the most American sounding of all their albums. And it's just lacking something for me. I'm not quite sure what it is, whether one side is just great and there's a bit less so. I think that might be the case. And I've given it 3.5 stars. So still very good, still very good. Paul, what have you got at number 6?
Number 6, I've got the Free album, the second album, which again I like a lot. I think it's a very funky album. I think it's and I think one of the reasons I like it so much is that is Andy Fraser's bass playing on it is phenomenal. You know, the first track, I'll Be Creeping, and particularly songs like Yesterday is just great. You know, and there's just a real sort of funky kind of feel to the album. There's also an indication again of what was to come later on with some of the tracks like Mouthful of Grass and what was the other one, Lying in the Sunshine, which to me could have been tracks on the Highway album. That kind of laid back sort of vibe, which was another aspect of Free's music altogether. One I love, absolutely love, you know, because they weren't just one-trick ponies in it. They could just do heavy blues and nothing else, you know. And then there's a beautiful Morning Sad Morning. I think it's a fantastic song. Great vocals, great harmonies from Andy Fraser. Interestingly, I was listening to a song this morning, an alternative version of one of the songs of one of the later albums, Don't Say You Love Me, which is on Fire and Water. And the alternative version has Andy Fraser doing backing vocals, and yet on the album version there are no backing vocals, and it's like, and it sounds really good when he's doing backing vocals, and yet they're not there on the and whether it was Paul Rodgers thinking, well, my vocal's good enough, I don't need an extra voice in there, but Andy Fraser never actually sang backing vocals live for some reason.
Interestingly, his solo album's actually really good. His first one, and he sounds like Paul Rodgers. Which is weird, but he sounds like Paul Rodgers. I thought he had a fantastic voice. Yeah.
I mean, there was the song "Broad Daylight" on that Free album. I know that Andy Fraser was insisting that it was going to be released as a single, but I think it completely bombed. If it even was released as a single, you know. So yeah, I mean, a good album. Again, to me, they still hadn't really properly got into stride by the end of the second album, but yeah, I'd give it 3.5.
Okay, 3.5, still very good.
Yeah.
Right. My number 5 is Heartbreaker, which is the last album, came out in '73. At this point, they've got Rabbit Bundrick on keyboards, who would later go on to join The Who for a number of years. Terrific player. And Tetsu Yamauchi on bass. And he replaces Fraser, but he's not on the same level. He's just nowhere near as good a player. Now, this for me is an album of 2 halves. The first half is absolutely brilliant. Love it. It's a perfect first half. It really is. The second half, I just think is average, which lets it down. And I mean, I've written here, it starts with the iconic Wishing Well. It's one of those great rock classics. It really is. Love the tone on it. Love the playing. It's one of those songs that's been sung to death in the pubs over the years by bands. Nobody does a good version of it. Then I love Come Together in the Morning. It's got that sort of heavy load feel to it, which they do on one of the earlier albums, and it sounds lovely. Come Together has beautiful harmonies. That's just great. Traveling in Style, which I think is really catchy. It sounds like the band. It's got that sort of band sound, you know, the Canadian The Band. It really like it. A little bit of Americana feel. Heartbreaker is classic Free. I just love the guitar tone on it. Rodgers' vocals are truly immense at this point. I mean, to be able to sing that well at such a young age is remarkable, really. I mean, what a voice. What an absolute voice. But then we've got some weird choices on it. Common Mortal Man by Rabbit. Doesn't sound like a free song, although it's pretty good. Easy on Me Soul, all right. And then Seven Angels, I think it's a classic free song. Got that proper free rock vibe. It's a very good album. If it was like the first side, it would be 5 stars all the way. But because it's not, and for me, it's an album of 2 halves. It's 3.5 stars. So that's my choice for number 5, Heartbreaker. What have you got in at number 5, Paul?
Number 5, I've got Free at Last. It's an album I really like. I think also, I mean, it was indicative. I mean, at that time, I mean, obviously, I was 16 at that time when that came out in 1972. Free had broken up. This was the sort of comeback album, and I think it could have been a disaster, that album, given the circumstances of them all breaking up. I think basically what happened, they all went away to form their own bands. I mean, Andy Fraser went away to form Toby, and Paul Rodgers went away to form Peace, and obviously Kossoff went away with Kurt Tetsu and Rabbit. And I think they all pretty quickly realised that, you know, the better option was sticking with Free. I mean, the background to the breakup was the fact that obviously the second album, the Highway album had bombed in comparison to Fire and Water, which we'll come on to later. But I think it was a very confident return for me, you know. And I think, having been around at that time, there was just like everybody was so delighted that Free were back together again. And you know, I mean, you've been through all the songs, and I agree. You know, I just think there were some great songs in there. Soldier Boy, to me, I remember seeing them doing that live, and I was just like, one of the things that sticks in my memory is seeing them do that. You know, just an all round good. I don't think there's a bad track on it, to be honest. I mean, I quite like Guardian of the Universe, despite the fact it has got a pretty crap title. Molten Gold kind of resurfaced when Backstreet Crawler brought their album out, and I'm not actually sure if it was. I think it was a new version of that which Kossoff did, but I mean it's a great song highlighting Kossoff's guitar playing and the way his guitar playing had evolved as well.
Yeah.
You know, really good song. But yeah, I mean, a decent album to me. I would give it a 4.
Right, okay, we're in 4-star territory. I know Rodgers to this day still describes Kossoff as his like soul brother musically, you know, but they were unsustainable as a band at the end because Kossoff was so gone with the drugs.
Yeah.
And I mean, he famously played Newcastle City Hall, and he was so wasted that they actually had to prop him up against the amps because he couldn't physically stand, you know, which is His
last gig with Free was actually in Newcastle City Hall.
Yeah, I think that might be the gig, which is such a shame, you know, such a shame.
Yeah.
Right, my number 4, speaking of playing live, we're at Free Live, which was recorded basically at the Locarno in Sunderland. Boo, never mind. And Fairfield Hall in Croydon. And yeah, the Locarno, I don't know why they did it in Sunderland, but never mind. It's a very good album. There are lots of sort of errors on this album. It's a really bizarre live album. I don't know why they've released it in this format, because I know they recorded a number of gigs and could have released other stuff. I mean, All Right Now, which starts off the album, is an absolute mess. If you listen to it, the guitar sort of conks out at one point. Kossoff always apparently struggled to play the riff properly, and it was Rodgers who showed him how to play the riff. He's not really a rhythm style guitarist like, say, Pete Townsend or Jimmy Page could do. He was a totally different style player. But the sounds great. It does sound like a proper live environment straight off the desk. I mean, there's some great definitive versions on this album for me. Like I'm a Mover just sounds, you know, it's an incredible version. Mr. Big, marvelous, you know, stupendous version. The Hunter is the best version in my opinion. You know, he comes in with a guitar off the crowd, and that is the version of the Hunter that you want to hear. You want to hear the full roar of the crowd, and it's got that live feel to it. But it's just a weird album. I mean, Get Where I Belong, for a studio track on a live album, that makes zero sense. What were they doing? That makes no sense. Yet on the additional bonus track versions that came out years later, you've got Woman, Walk in Me Shadow, Moonshine, all magnificent songs, all could have been on it originally. And it begs the question, why did they throw this sort of almost good song, but like an outtake song onto this album? I don't understand that whatsoever. But it is an essential free album for me. It's a really good album, despite the quality at times and despite the sort of mistakes, really. It's a 4-star album for me. It's a good album, very good. It's excellent, really. It's right on the edge there. So I've given it 4 stars just for the Hunter alone. You know. So what have you got in at number 4, Paul?
Number 4, I've got Heartbreaker, which again, I mean, that could have been a horrendous mess of an album given the circumstances. You know, personnel changes and Kossoff's problems. I think the saddest thing about that album is, given Kossoff's contribution to the album, is that he's not even listed he's not even listed as a member of the band on the album sleeve. He's listed as an additional musician or words to that effect. Which, given his contribution, certainly to the tracks on the first side of the album, I think is really harsh. Some great tracks on that, as you said. Wishing Well, it's probably not a better song for showcasing Paul Rodgers' voice and Wishing Well. As you said, nobody sings it like he sings it. And it's just a great song. That Heartbreaker, as you said, just such a moody, great riff. And I actually also like Easy on My Soul. I know you said you weren't that keen on it, but I like it. I like the feel of it. I love the keyboards in it. It's a little bit different. But yeah, it's for me it's a decent album in the circumstances. But I would give that a 4 as well.
Yeah, good. Well, we're really motoring. Yeah, that's good. Right then. So my number 3 is really the album. Well, the album that got me into free, first of all, was the double album, The Free Story. And I'd never really heard much by them, apart from All Right Now, obviously. And maybe it's My Brother Jake, which is an immense song. I had The Free Story. I thought, oh, it's actually fantastic. There wasn't a bad track on it. And I was about 14, and I was getting like Led Zeppelin and bands like that as well at the time. And so I got tons of Sobs, which is my number 3. It has a special thing for me. I just absolutely love it. I really, really love it. Came out in March '69. It was recorded roughly about the same time as Led Zeppelin 1, actually. But Led Zeppelin 1 came out earlier over release issues because it was due to the fact that on Tons of Sobs, they were going to put the Hunter in. So it took a little bit longer to release. For me, it's on par with Led Zeppelin 1 as an album. I mean, it's an incredible showcase for such a young band. Fraser at 15. Oh yeah, it's just crazy. Kossoff at 17. Rodgers and Kirk were 18. I mean, Kirk, such a good drummer, underrated, never gets mentioned. He's always slightly behind the beat when you listen to him, but he's never out of time. But he's just got this laid back groove. What a fabulous drummer. That's why when you hear great albums, I don't want to hear this metronomic beat, which is perfect and they can auto-correct it in the studio, because you'd end up losing drummers like Kirk, and Stuart Copeland, who's always slightly ahead of the beat. You'd lose all that sort of feel and it doesn't work. So his drumming is just great. What a band at that age. Kossoff had been in a band called Black Cat Bones. And he was massively influenced by Peter Green, supported Fleetwood Mac a few times as well. So you can hear it because as you were saying before, the less is more feel of Peter Green. And he certainly buys into that sort of ideal. It's, Tons of Sobs, I think it's a great title. As you say, proper Black Sabbath sort of album cover.
Yeah.
Weird. But it's got that sort of, I think Spooky Tooth had those type of album sleeves as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, also on Island, if I remember rightly. Yeah. I love it though. As I say, I love the opening acoustic fade of Over the Hills. It's very soulful. And then you got the hard blues fade in of Worry. There's some real, classic rock songs on there. I love Wild Indian Woman. I love I'm a Mover, Kirk's drumming, as I was saying before, that lovely groove. Fraser, we've already mentioned, his bass playing's just out, out of this world. Sweet Tooth is the best song Jimi Hendrix never wrote. It's got a proper Hendrix groove and feel. But I used to play it in my old blues band about 10, 15 years ago, and people used to just stare at you because they didn't know what it was. I love how the album closes that circular structure of Over the Hills as well. As I said, The Hunter's on there with Booker T and the MG's song. Free's version for me is much better than Led Zeppelin's brief reference on their album. It's just a fabulous, fabulous album. Maybe it's because it just means so much to me, but I'm giving it 4.5 stars. I just love it. And I'd be really tempted to give it 5, but I'm going to stick at 4.5. So there we have it. Paul, what have you got at number 3?
Number 3, an album that's very dear to my heart, which is Free Live. I remember buying it as a 16-year-old. It had this great sort of, the kind of envelope sleeve type thing. It was like a proper envelope when you got the vinyl in back in the day. And it was, I was lucky enough to see Free in 1972 at Green's Playhouse in Glasgow. Don't remember much about it except I was dying of flu, but I was determined I wasn't going to miss the gig. It was weirdly the only 2 things I remember about that gig. Bear in mind it's 51 years ago. Paul Rodgers was wearing a white suit, and he kept dropping to his knees like James Brown style, and he ended up with like mucky patches in his knees. And the other thing I remember was they did Soldier Boy. I think they had just released Free at Last, because that was a comeback tour after that. They were basically touring that album, and so that track was on Free at Last. But Free Live to me, it's just, there's few live albums which really capture the essence of a band the way Free Live does. And I kind of disagree a little bit when you said, when you're talking about, I actually was listening to All Right Now this morning, and on that version of it, and I really liked it, and I liked the messiness of it, because to me it kind of summed up there wasn't that sort of precision, kind of studio sound. It was like, this is it, warts and all, this is what you're getting. And the way Simon Kirk goes into that kind of little shuffle beat, which is different from the studio version, it's like, it's just got a really fantastic energy to it, and you've got the crowd are into it as well. Also, I mean, the version of Mr. Big that's in that, I was listening to that this morning, and I was welling up listening to Kossoff's solo, because it's just absolute perfection. It is absolute perfection, that solo, it really is. And then it obviously goes into Andy Fraser's solo, which as a bass player is just like, heaven to me as well, So I mean, that's that one song. It's worth having Free Live for that one song. And probably the only reason I didn't give it, that it's not my top album, is that mixture of, it's essentially not one gig. It's a bit from here, it's a bit from there. Some of the crowd sounds were kind of overdubbed, which is a bit weird. I don't know why they did that. And like you say, why did they include Get Well I Belong in that album when there was any amount of other live tracks? One track you didn't mention is that they're doing an incredible version of Crossroads as well, which I only really came across recently on another. It's like a bonus track in another
on
album.
the box set, isn't it?
And it's better than Cream's version of Crossroads.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is
absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's just an absolutely fabulous album, that Free Live. The only flaws are, as I said, the fact that it's not one gig, and including a studio track when they could have had any other number of live tracks. But it's a 5 for me, Free Live.
Oh, we're in 5 territory. I would love to see them bring out a proper box set of live stuff, because as you see at Crossroads, if people get the chance to go and listen to it, it'll be on YouTube somewhere. They do an incredible version of it.
There's a lot of terrible Free Live stuff around. I mean, there was an album that's just come out recently I was listening to this morning, and the quality's terrible. There's so many almost bootleg quality albums out there that I just...
They did a BBC one a few years ago, and one side of it was great, the other side was terrible.
Yeah,
so,
one side that is good, yeah. But there's a Stockholm album which is okay. There's another one just come out recently which I listened to this morning. Fully prepared to be disappointed at the quality, and I was disappointed because I was thinking, well, if it had been that good, it would have come out a long time before now, So
totally agree. So someone dig out the masters. Right, well, we're down to the big two. We've both got the same top two, but which order, who knows? We shall see. Well, my number two, controversially, is Fire and Water, released June 1970. Got the number two in the charts. It was a massive hit. Was only 35 minutes long, which is really short, bearing in mind you could probably get about 45 minutes in those days on the vinyl. But it's full of rock classics. Fire and Water, you know, stupendous opener. I mean, scintillating at times. Again, all that space on there and the vocals really pushing and the band are driving along. Mr. Big, again, just the whole thing is just space everywhere. Then, of course, you got the massive hit All Right Now, which was enormous in America as well. I mean, Andy Fraser apparently sang the chorus after some terrible gig. I think it was in Durham somewhere. And then he was singing this in the dressing room. And then all of a sudden, I think Rogers, just him and Fraser wrote the song in 20 minutes. So the story goes. Kossoff guitar, though, shines on the album. It's that free signature sound of space, nothing happening, but hanging up the notes. Clapton famously asked him how he got his vibrato, which is a bizarre question as a guitarist. How did you get the vibrato? And the album is balanced off front with some of the heavier stuff like Fire and Water and All Right Now, with some of the greatest ballads, in my opinion, ever written. You know, Oh, I Wept is, oh, my Lord, what a tune. Heavy Load, another one, absolutely top-notch, an absolute top-notch ballad. And then Don't Say You Love Me, again, another, you know, amazing song. The ballads are beautiful. There's just so much soul in them, you know. He's a soulful blues balladeer. He's got the whole package going on. And as I've said before, I think at the time there's only Rod Stewart at that time who's as good a rock blues singer as Paul Rodgers and is able to get that soulful tone to his voice. The slight difference between the pair of them, and I think they're on a par with each other, by the way. I think the slight difference is Paul Rodgers always has this sense of melancholy to his voice, where Rod doesn't. Rod's got a bit more swagger, I think, you know, at times, you know, and that's maybe because he was in the Faces as well. And Rodgers has got this real melancholy where you're almost, you know, you're wiping the tears away from your eyes because of some of the pain that's coming through the lyrics and the songs. It's you know, Fire and Water is one of the great albums. Everybody should have it. 5 stars all day long. That's my number two. So, Paul, what have you got at number two?
Number two, I've got Highway, and it was a real tough call. It could have gone either way for me, 1 and 2. But Highway, I mean, Highway, and it was a bit of a tragedy for Free, really, because after the hype of Fire and Water album and, you know, the success and, you know, All Right Now getting into the charts, and they did the Isle of Wight Festival, and they were really riding on a crest of a wave, and then Highway came out and really it bombed, and I don't fully understand why. I think the cover might have had something to do with it. The cover was didn't even have Free's name in the front of it. It just said Highway.
I would rank it in the top 10 worst album sleeves of all time, just because, as you say, it's not got the band's name on, it's got the word Highway on, so everybody thought it was a band called Highway. If they'd had Free slapped on the front, I think it would have been a massive seller.
I think from a music point of view, it didn't have a kind of smack you between the eyes kind of All Right Now on it, which probably people who'd got into them. I mean, I actually think that All Right Now became a bit of an albatross around Free's neck to a certain extent. Similar in some ways to the way Stairway to Heaven became an albatross around the necks of Led Zeppelin. Everybody associated the band with one song. And Free were way more than a one-trick pony, as I keep saying. There was so many different dimensions to the music, you know. And you know, Highway was a much more laid-back album, and great for that. And you know, it's an album on a nice Sunday afternoon, sitting in the garden. The first album I'll go for is Highway. I just think it's a great album for sitting in the sun, having a beer. Just it's such a chill out album. There's some great songs on it. You know, Be My Friend, which they did a great version on the live album. But you know, Sunny Day, you know, absolutely beautiful song. Love You So, Soon I Will Be Gone, absolutely fantastic song. Great guitar playing in that as well. You know, just again that kind of economical style of Kossoff's. It's just about this kind of soul and Roger's voice, but it was there in Kossoff's guitar playing as well. So you had the two playing off each other all the time, that kind of melancholy, you know, which was just incredible. I mean, I don't really understand why the Steeler didn't become a big hit, because to me,
Yeah.
I would choose the Steeler over All Right Now any day of the week. I think it's a fantastic song, which is far more representative of Free's music than All Right Now was, which was a complete throwaway kind of, had nothing to do with anything else they did. You know, and it was nothing. There was no sort of common thread between that and what the other stuff that Free did. But I love the Steeler, and yet, you know, it was basically because of the album bombed and the Steeler bombed as a single. That effectively led to Free breaking up the first time round, because they just thought, well, you know, we're not gonna make it, you know, which is really sad in a way. But to me, it's a fantastic album. I don't think there's a bad track on it, really. So it's definitely a 5-star album for me, and it could easily have been my number one.
Right, great choice. It's hard to knock that like out. It really is. My number one, as you've worked out, then is Highway.
Yeah.
It came out in December 1970. They had 2 albums out in the same year, 2 incredible albums as well. As you say it, I've just said they're one of the worst album sleeves of all time. It's so bad. It really cost them. I think it cost them their career, really.
Yeah.
The album, as you say, is drenched in melancholia. This album is the album for me that's massively influenced by the band. And Andy Fraser was a huge fan of the band, and it sounds it as well. This could easily have been a great band album. The bass playing, as I keep saying, is superb on it. The Highway song is terrific, although I've got you, the Steeler should have been the opener. Great, powerful blues rock. The other great blues rock band at the time, The Faces, do a fantastic version of the Steeler. So if people get the chance to go and listen to that, go and listen on YouTube or whatever you listen to, they do a great version of it. And Rod mentions how big a great band they are as well. Be My Friend is just sublime. You've got those pleading, almost soul lyrics of Rogers, and his voice, I keep saying, is amazing for a 20-year-old lad. Sunny Day. It's terrific. It's uplifting, yet it's got really melancholic lyrics. It's a real sort of juxtaposition. It's really odd, yet it's so happy sounding. And then there's that wistful sort of drift away sense of sadness. Riding on a Pony is from the Mr. Big School of Songs again. Just, you know, fantastic. Love You So is probably my favorite song on the album. Amazing singing, beautiful playing, driven along by the guitar, by the band. I saw him do this a couple of years ago, a few years ago at City Hall. Somebody was crying in the audience, and I can see why, because it just has that sort of feel that's going to affect you. You know, it will affect you. It's such a good ballad, and it's so beautifully sung, and the band are, for me at this point, they're the top of their game. I really love Bodie. It might seem a little bit rushed in some respects because you're not sure what the lyrics are about, but it works. And Soon I'll Be Gone again, and another amazing ballad. And I love the way Rogers does that little vocal trick with his lyrics. It's almost on the edge of being sort of having a sort of Eastern feel to it as well. Which is really unusual. We wouldn't expect it from Free. But again, Free at the best for me, 5 stars all day long. And it just edges out Fire and Water. And I mean, just, you know. So Paul, you're number one then.
Yeah, well, obviously, my number one is Fire and Water. I was speaking to a long time school friend of mine who played guitar. Well, I played in the same band. He played guitar, and I was speaking to him the other day, telling him I was doing this show, and he said, "Oh, Fire and Water is in his top 10 albums of all time." And I was like, "Yeah, come think about it, it'd probably be close to my top 10 albums of all time as well." Just, I mean, I was just some fantastic songs on that album. I mean, you've already mentioned it, Fire and Water. Interestingly, Paul Rodgers said that he wrote Fire and Water with Wilson Pickett in mind. And Wilson Pickett actually later on did a decent version of it. Not as good as Freeze, obviously, but he did a decent version of it. You know, Oh I Wept, great laid back vibe to that as well, you know. Heavy Load, one of my all-time favourite Freeze songs, Andy Fraser on piano. But with a great guitar solo in that as well. Well, we keep saying it, Rodgers' vocals, you know, over again, just fantastic voice. It's highlighted in that song. It's not, as I say, I don't think there's really a bad track on it. I mean, probably All Right Now is my least favourite song on the album, which says something about it, you know.
Yeah.
So for me, absolutely no danger. That's definitely a 5-star album for me, and my all-time favourite Free album.
Yeah, it's two cracking albums in the same year. It's just amazing, you know. And then there's the odd track like My Brother Jake doesn't even feature on any of the albums, you know, which is a fabulous pop song.
One thing I meant to say, you mentioned about, I mean, we haven't talked a lot about Simon Kirk here. I mean, kind of inevitably the people that I've talked about are Kossoff, Rodgers and Fraser. But to me, Simon Kirk is the unsung hero of that band, because there are very few drummers that could have slotted in and played drums at Free. I mean, you think about his contemporaries, you know, Ian Pace, no chance. John Bonham wouldn't have fit in that band. You know, Keith Moon, no chance.
Yeah.
You know, the only and basically Kirk created that sense of space that the others played in. You know, I mean, in a sense they create space for each other, but I think a lot of that is down to Simon Kirk. You know, and he wasn't all that. He wasn't a flashy drummer, but he was an absolutely integral part of their sound.
But he plays everything right, doesn't he?
Exactly.
You know. Yeah. They're just great musicians. They are great musicians, or were in some cases, and sadly. What an absolute top-notch band. What a top-notch band, and finished way too early for me. Okay, folks, there we go. Fascinating there. Fascinating. So please leave your comments. Obviously, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. And a number of you are watching all the shows and not subscribing, so please subscribe. You will see it just down there, so please do. Okay? So until the next time, thank you very much, folks. Leave your comments. Let us know what you think. Put your order down there. And I hope you've enjoyed the show. Till next time, take care and look after yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye.